Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Harbor of Hope. Now, Harbor of Hope can be located at theharboroofhope.org. They are a foster agency in the North Texas area, and we've partnered with them to try to get good people to find out more about foster care, find out how more to be a foster family, and hopefully the goal is to place a child in the home. Now, Harbor of Hope, their goal as an agency is to provide positive opportunities to all people it interacts with. Children should have the opportunity to heal and engage in meaningful activities within the community and their families. Now, Harbor of Hope, Inc. strives to make a safe environment for families and children, and will take advantage of positive opportunities to support permanency goals and the overall well-being of the agency's clients. Harbor of Hope provides child care services and treatment services to male and female children from birth through 17 and up to 22 if they meet the specific eligibility requirements for continued care. It is the agency's goal that foster families create strong working relationships with all members of the treatment team. Now, with that approach in mind, Harbor of Hope intends to create an environment for children that promotes healing and a healthy transition to permanency. It's a great mission. Great organization, Miss Jamie Steiner, who heads that up. You can listen to her on episode 13 of the podcast and go check them out. Again, it's theharboroofhope.org. You can also go to streetwarriorradio.com/harborofhope and check out more information about them. And if you want to reach them by phone, you can reach them at area code 817-304-8207 or their physical address in Denton, Texas of 100 West Oak Street, Suite 110. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Top Notch Tactics. Top Notch Tactics. Those losers still don't have a website, but they're a great company, and they provide security services, security consulting services, physical security, LEO, and veteran-owned. For more information about them, you can go to streetwarriorradio.com and send us a message or email us at info@streetwarriorradio.com. They have supported the podcast greatly in providing all of our audio equipment, and we greatly appreciate that. And we have a brand new mic, so we can start doing in-studio interviews that sound better for you. Also, Amazon click-through. Go to streetwarriorradio.com. Now, at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, there's going to be a little picture. It says Amazon.com. You click on that. You go to Amazon.com, to their website, and if you're already signed in, you stay signed in. Doesn't cost you anything, and do your normal shopping. So every time you do your normal shopping, a portion of that, a small percentage, comes back to the podcast, and we use that for stuff like paying bills and things like that for the podcast. None of that money actually goes into our pockets. It's for the podcast entirely. www.streetwarriorradio.com/Amazon click-through. Do that. Make me happy. Make Big Bo happy. Make BD happy. Make us all happy. Support the podcast.
American 11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering their phone. Our number 1 has been staffed, and our 5 has been staffed.
Hey, I'm going to call from Washington. I am in a situation with American 11, a possible hijack.
What's going on, Betty? The crap is erratic again. Problem, very erratic. Betty, talk to me. Betty, are you there? Betty? Betty?
The plane just
What?
It's 737.
Yeah, what?
The World Trade Center.
Who are you talking to?
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
United 175, New York. We have some problems over here right now. We might have a hijack over here, two of them. Jules, this is Ryan. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things will go well, I'm going to do this. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. Go have a good time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you. And I'll see you later. Bye, babe.
What are those people going to do? All the elevators are blocked out.
Oh my God. So both towers are now.
Okay, I got an aircraft 6 miles east of the White House.
Crystal City, just north of Crystal City.
Just to the north of your town.
Yeah, stop all departures.
Pentagon just got hit. Don't put me in that. God damn, I can't even protect my NCA. United 93, that traffic for you is 1 o'clock, 12 miles eastbound 370. Negative contact, we're looking, United 93. United 93, Cleveland, if you hear the center, ident. I got that piece down. You put him in today. You have the ball board.
Tuesday, 9:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
We're 56865. We have, I believe it is a Boeing 757. Can you see him up there, sir?
That's confirmed. It looks like he's rocking his wings.
Roger.
He's rocking back and forth.
We're 56865. I advise you stay away from that aircraft. Go north as fast as you can.
United 93. Have you got information on that yet?
Yeah, he's down.
He's down?
Yes.
When did he land?
He did not land.
Oh, he's down?
Yeah,
Down?
somewhere up northeast of Camp David.
Sean, it's me. I just want to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. There's lots of smoke, and I just wanted you to know that I love you always.
At number 2 World Trade Center, right. Ladies and students in the walking. We're not ready to die, but it's getting bad.
I'm on the 83rd floor. I'm gonna die, aren't I? No. I'm gonna die.
Ma'am, say your prayers. We're going to think positive because you got to help each other get off the floor.
I'm
Now,
gonna die.
This is Street Warrior Radio episode 029 with your hosts Big Bo and me, JC. Big Bo's not in today, and filling in is going to be Mr. BD. Mr. BD.
What's going on, JC? Thanks for
Oh,
having
not
me
much. So the audio you just heard is a series of recordings from a day that changed the world forever. Certainly changed everyone in America, and set a course in motion for going on 18 years of war. And that was the events of 9/11/2001, September 11, 2001. And those recordings were from flights, from people on the ground, 911 calls, etc. During that attack by members of Al Qaeda, 19 hijackers, mostly Saudi-born, and financed partially by one of our closest allies in the Middle East. Go figure that one. BD.
JC.
This episode is, first of all, dedicated to that day and the people that were directly affected by that, and their families, and America and the world and our allies and everyone that supported us after that. And as we look back at the conclusion of the anniversary of September 11th, What do you think?
Well, to be flat out honest with you, listening to that again stirred up all those emotions that I saw when I originally watched it playing out while I just got off of a midnight shift. Like most Americans, I guarantee you will remember that day for the rest of your life. Just like when I talked with my father the day that President Kennedy was shot. He still remembers exactly where he was.
Yeah, it's a majorly historical event that is going to stand out in everybody's mind. It's a pivotal moment in people's lives.
Yes.
I was September 2000. I was a 20-year-old loser at the time, and still haven't changed that much. But I remember being woken up by a friend. I was asleep, and my friend was like, "Man, I think we're being bombed." And he was like, "What?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Turn on the TV. I think we're being bombed, like the World Trade Center in New York. I think we got bombed." And just as I turned on the TV, about 4 seconds after that's when the second plane hit the second tower. Yeah. And then everything kind of unraveled after that. And I think everyone in America, or certainly the world, was just glued to television sets after that. For the rest of the day, you just want to see, you were just so shocked and everything by all of it, and it was such a massive impact. You just kind of you just couldn't take your eyes off it. You want to know what's going on, what was going to happen next, And it was a pretty incredible day. And then we went to war, and here we are looking back at it, and almost 2 decades later. And what's changed? What do you think's changed?
I don't think much has changed, because you're still going to have those certain people that it strikes a fire in their gut that makes you want to go out and make sure that it never happens to your family, your friends again. And then you have the other ones that are going to just sit back and go, well, that only happened once. It's not going to happen to us again, because they feel that our borders are just as secure as they ever were.
Yeah. Well, I think in a lot of ways we're probably better off than we were. I think the advancements we've made in particularly American law enforcement when it comes to combating terrorism, our intelligence community has grown. Obviously, the capabilities have grown.
I would agree with the intelligence community is growing, but on the local level of law enforcement, I still think it still has very much of that knee-jerk reaction to where they're only going to respond after something happens instead of before.
Well, there's challenges there, right? Because
absolutely,
local law enforcement's not geared to combat terrorism, right?
Correct, but it's a situation that you have to be planning for.
Yeah, no, and that was my next point. I mean, it should be, right?
Right. But you still have those departments that qualify once a year.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's most.
Yes.
That's most.
Because that's all the requirement is.
And what kind of detriment is that to their communities to not be prepared for major incidents? And I look at, whereas statistically speaking, something like that probably isn't going to happen, in BFE, Alabama, but you never know, right?
Hey, they had a training camp over in Arizona.
I think it was New Mexico.
Was it New Mexico?
I think it was New Mexico, yeah.
That's close enough.
Yeah, it's all the same. It's all brown over there.
The land?
The ground.
Yes.
That's what I meant before. The ground.
Big Bo can get away with it.
The ground. Yeah. 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 Whatever. But when you look at local law enforcement, just taking kind of a side tangent here, when you look at local law enforcement, I mean, the main mission of local law enforcement is not counterterrorism. It's not any of those kind of things. But when you look at your large metropolitan areas that tend to be surrounded by suburban towns and then smaller towns, fanning out from there, obviously major incidents can spill over into other jurisdictions. And that's why I think, especially if you're connected to a large urban area, that you should have preparations, planning, etc., to deal with the aftermath or the possible spillover of a major incident. I mean, if you look at the San Bernardino situation, right? You had two ISIS-inspired individuals that shot up an office party and then ended up in a gun battle with the police.
Yes.
And you're talking about a large urban area there. Very easily could have been a situation like the situation in Garland at the Dral Muhammad event when you had the ISIS inspired individuals that went over there and were put down by the Garland police. That could have easily not gone that way, and they could have fled into neighboring jurisdictions, gone north and ended up into, little towns like Wiley or,
Murphy or anywhere. Yeah.
And people that don't know what that is, there's little towns in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Because easily, the situations could easily spill over, and I think it's important for agencies that are connected to that to absolutely be prepared for those potential situations, because they never know when your little town is going to become part of the bigger picture. Right. It could happen. Everything's so interconnected, and it's extremely possible. But that's a whole nother tangent. Honestly, that's like
right.
Go on about that. That's a whole episode in
like
itself.
15 episodes worth of podcasting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of frustration there and a lot of different things. But do you think that the war on terror has been effective?
I believe, both coming from the military aspect of it, that it has proven its point to the fact that if you attack us, we will do everything in our power to locate and try to extinguish those that were involved. But because terrorism is such an ever-evolving, ever-faceted, it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube. Every time that you make one little move to fill in the piece, other pieces pop up that you're like, oh, I wasn't anticipating that, or it's the nature of terrorism.
Yeah.
It's shock and awe and trying to get whatever agenda that they're going for.
It's ever evolving, of course.
It is ever evolving.
From looking at it from a military aspect, do you think it's time that, and this is not meant to be a political question, this is meant to be a strategic question, right? So do you think it's time to call it a day in places like Afghanistan or
No, because if anything history has taught us is whenever you give up a little ground, you get somebody worse that comes in.
I feel trying to keep politics out of it, but not
Absolutely.
100% able to, because war is, of course, in some minds, an extension of politics, it's an extension of foreign policy. Certain political decisions have made the situation specifically in the central Middle East, right there in the Mesopotamia, thank you, area of Iraq, Syria, all that kind of stuff, has clearly made the situation unstable, to say the least. Now, great strides have been made since then to combat organizations like ISIS. But then you look at what that situation has spawned in places like Europe, right, where you have ISIS directly taking responsible for attacks, and you have Islamic extremism through Boko Haram in Africa, and
those who were living under rock, you're talking about the stabbings and all that in Paris and everywhere else.
Yeah, and the trucks and the big attack in Paris and all that in Belgium.
We've had some of that in New York and the Boston Marathon.
Right, and you can. Now we like to classify stuff here in the United States as lone wolf or inspired attacks. We don't like to tie them directly to things, because then we can say, well, it's homegrown. It's not.
It's because of that nasty word that you and I hate the most, called politically correct.
Yes. And I think that though the political climate's changed, I think that the roller coaster of situation that we've had in going on 2 decades of war. I mean, you're talking about 2 decades of war. You know what I mean? That's a long time. It's a long time for a country to be at war. And it's by no means a conflict or a simple operation. It's a war. It's an ongoing war. The one in Afghanistan has lasted this entire time. We dipped out of Iraq for a little bit, not completely, but obviously we had most likely assets there. But you look at that situation, you look at Afghanistan, you look at Africa, and our role in Africa has expanded greatly.
Yes.
I feel like, despite the fact that we're spread out all over the globe combating these people, I feel like, though, we've been successful in a lot of ways, because we haven't had another 9/11. We haven't had another mass attack like that in the United States. You have.
Does it mean that they've stopped planning it?
No, of course not.
Okay.
Of course not.
It just means we got better at anticipating.
Well, what I mean by that is our intelligence apparatus has grown and learned.
Yes.
Our war fighters have grown and learned.
Yes.
Our strategists have grown and learned. Our politicians will never learn. But through those experiences and through all this time, we've been able to combat the problem and keep it, from an organizational standpoint, but keep it at bay over there. That doesn't mean that logistics aren't in place. That doesn't mean that there's not sleeper cells in the United States. That doesn't mean any of those things, right? But you have to imagine how many of those things are stopped before if and when or ever we hear about them, right? Because you got to wonder how many of those operations are classified and stay classified.
Yes.
And you've had the dismantling of several networks, although from what I've read, Al-Qaeda, the original Al-Qaeda, has begun to reform in certain areas. For a good amount of time, we dismantled a lot of their networks, and ruthlessly so, as it should have been. In that, we haven't had a major attack here in the United States since. Europe's another story. But here in the United States, we've been pretty good, minus these quote-unquote lone wolf incidents that pop up every once in a while. So in the context of that, do you think we've been successful? Or is it an ongoing thing where success can't be measured?
I would venture to say that success cannot be ventured, because you might be able to, not saying that we've lost, don't get me wrong on this, but you can win a battle day to day, but the total outcome of the war may not go in your favor. So success cannot be measured simply because you went and eradicated one terroristic cell in one small area over there.
I think the question becomes a matter of will and resolve, right?
Yes.
I have no doubt that the people that volunteer their freedom to potentially die for us, who go overseas and deal with those sorts of things, I have no doubt what their will and resolve is. They're there, right?
Absolutely.
They're doing a job, they're doing a hard job, and they're putting their own lives at risk. And then at home, you have people that are putting their lives at risk, that their will and resolve is sound, but they're the minority of people.
Correct.
Right? And America tends to have a very short memory, right?
Yes.
We get real upset until something pisses us off again. And then we get real upset and we throw a fit, and then we calm down again. Mm-hmm. Then we get real pissed off and we throw a fit, and then we calm down. Now, when we throw a fit, it tends to be pretty devastating for whoever pissed us off, for the most part.
Yes.
But I have to wonder if the will and the resolve of us as a people, despite this annual reminder of why we're in this, of why it's important that we stay on it, of why it's crucial and it's critical for our future, that we stay on this fight, regardless of how long it lasts. At what point do you think that will and resolve of the people, the majority, goes away?
I would say by the third generation. Because honestly, how many people actually remember the true meaning of July 4th, Independence Day?
Well, I mean,
think about it.
Depending on what Man of the Street you watch, some people don't even know what Independence Day is.
Exactly.
Or who fought in it. Or that we had a Civil War.
Right.
Or who was in the Civil War. Or, it's incredible.
I mean, they're trying to take Auschwitz out of history books.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. But if you can get a younger generation not believing in the facts and remember what actual true history is, what better way to, mind mess with the general masses?
I just worry that we get to a point where we say, you know what? That's enough. That's enough. We're done.
I think the politicians were there 6 years ago.
Well, they were. That's obvious.
Yes.
We had the pullout of in Iraq in 2011, and it's very clear that a status of forces agreement could have been reached, but one particular side, meaning ours, didn't want to compromise on what the Iraqis wanted in their country, right?
Correct.
And in Afghanistan, the drawdown of combat participation was supposed to be, I believe the deadline was 2014. Obviously, that's come and gone.
Yes.
And obviously, our forces are still engaged there in some capacity. We still have troops on patrol. We still have special operations forces operating in the region. We still have capture-kill missions. We still have the whole 9 yards. They're still going on. They're still attacking with drones. We're doing the whole 9 yards. It may be that the Afghanis have taken over a majority of the security of their country, but they're still backed by American advisors. There's still Americans on the ground there, still armoring up, still slunging their rifles and humping it out there. So you can call it what you want, right? But at the end of the day, there's still guys out there in harm's way.
Absolutely.
And now we're back in Iraq and Syria.
Yes.
And it seems like every time we try to distance ourselves from it, there's a reason why we have to go back.
Yep. I mean, I have friends of mine that are in Africa right now. So, does that make me happy? No.
Well, yeah.
I wish I was there. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you're fine. I mean, in a recent reminder of how of our operations in Africa, which is very often forgotten about. I think it's probably not well known by the American people for the most part what we're doing in Africa, but we're running anti-terrorism operations in Africa, like nobody's business.
Because they have to remember it's like 7.2 miles from Africa to Yemen, right across the strait.
Yeah, it's all connected. I mean, you have Yemen, you have Saudi, you have Somalia, and then Sudan, going northwest into Libya, and then continuing down into Central and South Africa.
Yes.
I mean, it's there, and you have organizations like Boko Haram, Al Qaeda, ISIS. You have all these groups plus the shit show that Libya is. Africa is a hotbed of terrorism. Yes. Africa is a hotbed of these extremists. I would say probably looking forward into the future, probably presents the greatest threat overall in comparison to what's going on in the Middle East. That's just my opinion, just looking at the future.
Yeah.
Because of the growth of extremism in Africa. I mean, a recent example of that, there were 4 U.S. Special Forces Green Berets that were killed in a firefight. And unfortunately, a certain organization decided to share that video with everybody, which, is what it is, but agree or disagree. And have you watched that?
No, I have not.
I wish I could say I didn't, but I did, and I may get some haters for that. But I felt like I needed to. And I wish I hadn't, honestly, because it's a terrible video. There's no. I don't remember there being any audio because I think it's a re-released. There's audio, but it's like a re-released from the bad guys.
Yeah.
With their music and BS behind it. But it's a stark reminder of what we're going through, of what our nation is going through, and our nation didn't even realize it.
Yeah. Well, just to show you how soon people forget, you remember Benghazi?
Oh, very well.
Dragged the U.S. ambassador's body through the streets.
I mean,
I was boots on ground over there, so not during that Pacific time, but I was in Africa during that whole situation.
Yeah, in Benghazi. Everybody forgets about Benghazi. Despite the media behind Benghazi, despite the political turmoil over that particular incident, it's just forgotten about in people's minds.
Yeah, it was swept underneath the rug.
Yeah, and probably a lot of people don't realize. I mean, I'm sure our listeners do, but probably a lot of people don't realize that also happened on 9/11.
Yep.
2012.
Over a false narrative of some video.
Right. Which was, again, a big political mess.
Yeah.
That is not important at this. I mean, it's important to the narrative of the story, but for the context of this episode, it's not important. But, and as a marking of that great day in their history, four more Americans died.
Yes.
For literally no reason. Literally no reason. There was no reason for any of that. The lack of support, both political and logistical, is just incredible. It's incredible. And it goes to show you how quickly, depending on what your mindset is, how quickly you want to just move past all that stuff because it's uncomfortable and it's not friendly and we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, there's too many safety pins going around.
Because it's a reminder that we have to be ugly. There's times when we have to be ugly.
Yes.
When we have to take that red, white, and blue, and we have to march somewhere, and we have to take care of business. And that's ugly business. And there's great people that do it, but we don't want to talk about it.
Correct.
And that's a shame. We should be talking about it. We should be reminded what our guys are going through. During World War II, if you went to the movie theater, you got regular news updates on the status of the war. What
telling you to buy war bonds, help support that.
A lot of it's propaganda, right? But the support was incredible, and not that people don't support our men and women in uniform. Although there's a segment that doesn't, of course. That's going to be in any free society. But I don't think that the sacrifices and the things that spawned from that terrible day in 2001 are etched enough in our minds and our collective consciousness where that will and that resolve is going to continue to last. I just don't think it's going to. And of course, if the military gets pulled out, well, they're just doing their job. It's not their fault. It's not their will and resolve that's been broken. It's
correct.
Their leadership. Not specifically the military leadership, but the politicians, right? What does it take to be reminded? What does it take to get back to that frame of that September 12th mentality when America was united, when we all came together and were like, okay, all right.
The ugly truth of it is it's going to take another horrific event.
Yep, and I don't disagree with you. I think that's right.
I mean, it puts a pit in my stomach to even say it, but it's the truth. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'll say that you get people, and please don't get me wrong on this, people, but you get in that certain mindset, you get in the humdrum of the daily life going to and from, which is one of the reasons why a majority of officers get killed because of complacency.
100%.
You just start going through the motions instead of remembering you're there for a specific purpose, a specific reason. Like Jared Rustin, you have to have that mindset that, oh, I thought I got punched in the face when you're actually shot.
Right.
I mean, that was a great episode, by the way.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, but you have to. You just, I mean, until you've been in a fight, because I know you and I both have, compared to officers that have never been in a fight, they don't know what the resolve is.
Right.
And unfortunately, with this day and age and the way that everything is going towards community policing, hey, show us on Facebook, hey, look, we're, rainbows and puppy dogs shooting out of our butts and our hands because we're that type of officer now. You still have the salty dogs, as somebody once called me, that they want to hide you in the, as you so coinly phrased, hide you in a do not break unless war cabinet.
Yeah.
And I pray my kids never have to see it, but like I tell them all the time, my definitions of survival is going to be different than most.
Well, you got to have hammers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Your organizations have to have hammers. They have to have guys that are going to go out there and handle business.
Yes.
Right.
Is it going to look
and it's
clean
not
and pretty on Facebook, on social media?
No,
absolutely not.
It's going to be violent. It's going to be violent. It's going to be real ugly.
Correct.
But
Does that mean we're planning on going out and shooting people? Absolutely not.
Well, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense at all. That's not what we signed up for. We just signed up to protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States, state of Texas, and to protect citizens.
Hey, pull your mic a little closer to you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Sorry.
You're fine.
I'm shooting out the side of my mouth.
No, you're good. No, you got to have those people, right?
Yes.
You have to have those people to deal with those problems, because those people are mentally equipped to deal with those problems.
Correct.
You have to have them, and they're honestly kind of the glue of the organization. As much as you know, admins may not like them very much, and as much as
admins are pushing them out.
Well, that
to
happens.
Get more of the beta males to come in, the yes men, the ones that don't have an opinion for themselves or how the law actually reads, but oh no, well, this is how it's always been done. This is how you're going to do it because beep 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 beep. I want you to be a robot.
Well, it comes down to being afraid of looking bad. So, and that brings me to another point. I would tie in the whole afraid of the optics, afraid of the media perception, afraid of, you know, answering tough questions. Mm-hmm. I would put that as a part of the virus of political correctness, right?
Yes.
And
do you remember Muammar Gaddafi?
I do, yes.
Do you remember how he was spouting off, talking about he was going to destroy America, da 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 da?
Right.
Well, we took care of that. You didn't hear anything more about that.
No, he kind of minded his own business after that.
Well, when your house gets blown up, I mean, sometimes things happen.
Well, you know, the beautiful thing about... So we have limits, right?
Yes.
And we have limits.
We have ROEs, rules of engagement.
Well, and specifically what I mean is here at home in the United States. We have a constitution.
Yes.
That protects all of us, that sets, hey, this is what the government can do, this is what the government can't do. From the top all the way down to your local, right? And in that, people who are here have certain protections.
Yes.
Right? Excuse me. And you can argue all day long and get into that whole argument about, you know, if they're a citizen, do they still get those protections or not? I'm not getting into that. But the point of it is that you have rights and protections. So there are limits to the intelligence gathering apparatus of law enforcement, right?
Correct.
Without going through certain channels, certain court channels, right?
Yes.
So, despite that, I feel like for the most part, because if you look at statistically speaking, yeah, you could probably nail down, you know, one homegrown terrorist incident in the United States probably a year. And this is just a figure I'm pulling out of my ass. But you could probably average it out to probably about one a year since 9/11, right? More or less.
More or less.
Despite the loss of life, despite the tragedy that those are, it's pretty good. If you think about it. We live in a free society, a free, open society, right? Although some would argue it's a police state, and some would argue it's this and that. And I guess depending on what state you live in depends on, you know, how much freedom you actually have. But in the grand scheme of things, though, between our federal partners and our state and county and local partners, we've done a pretty good job, I think, overall. Would you agree or disagree?
I would agree.
Why would you agree?
I was just being cordial. No, I honestly would. I would agree to a certain extent because we don't know exactly what has been stopped before it's ever been started.
Yeah, I remember towards the end of the Bush administration, there had been some stuff come out about there were several incidents that were stopped. They declassified portions of it.
Yep.
The specifics on that I couldn't give you off the top of my head. And and I just now thought of it in this conversation. Otherwise, I'd have researched it. But I don't remember any of those type of things coming out of the Obama administration, and certainly none of that's come out of the Trump administration that I know of. But it goes to show you that the machine is working, right?
Correct.
And most of it is getting filtered out, which is great. So I think overall we've done a good job. Again, it goes back to those individuals with that will and that resolve to get it done.
Yes. But with that being said, that was under different, example for the military, it was under different generals. Now we're getting more generals that have never seen any combat in.
Right.
And have that different mindset. That if it does happen again, they're going to have to go through that whole learning curve all over again.
Well, it's a learning curve that's going to they're going to have to get over, you know.
Quickly, I hope.
But I think the same thing's true for law enforcement as well, you know. How do you think local agencies could do a better job?
Well, administrations ain't going to like this. But I think that if you get out there and you actually know who your players are and you start making contact with them, let them know that, hey, I have you in my eyesights. I'm watching everything you're doing. If you mess up, I'm going to be there.
But that brings up a counter to that, though.
Correct. It will.
Because the majority of I know this is going to shock some people, but the majority of your terrorism internationally comes from Islamic groups. Right? So if you have people that you, as an officer, believe, based on intelligence that you've gathered on the street, that this group of individuals may be, you know, up to something, where do you cross that fine line of racial profiling? That's
the conundrum that everybody's facing right now.
And how much has that kept people back?
Oh, I'm sure it's kept 90% of the people back without that federal blessing.
Because it's not racist.
No, it's not.
But it's perceived as such.
Absolutely.
And everybody knows perception's reality, right?
Correct.
And all it takes is that perception. And all it takes is an email or a phone call to ACLU or CARE or any of those people to bring a lot of negative media attention down.
Oh, and it will rain like hellfire.
Oh, yeah. On a national or international level. Right?
Yep.
Where do you draw that fine line? Because that's a real fine line right there. Is that something that, as a local asset, you just say, you know, that's the Fed's deal. Let them worry about that.
I think a majority of the departments try to push it off on that.
Do you think that local agencies have a responsibility, though, to participate?
Absolutely.
I think it's hard for smaller agencies because you have the issue of resources, you have demands from the community, you have.
But you can still appoint somebody as a liaison. It'd have to be strictly a volunteer because of the resources and lack of manpower and stuff that would get pushed off on your off-duty time and all that.
Well, I look at it as like crime prevention, right? Because if it happens here on American soil, it's considered a criminal act.
Absolutely.
So, to me, it's a crime prevention avenue, right?
Yes.
Nobody wants to trample on anybody's civil rights. Nobody wants to unfairly target anybody.
Right.
But the fear of targeting the right people because of an accusation, it's going to have to be one of those things where people stand up and they just go, no, wait a minute. Did we not... Have we forgotten all the lessons we learned from 2001? Have we forgotten all the things that have occurred since then? We have to pay attention to these things. It's part of our job, and it's not racist. It's maybe criminal profiling, right?
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with criminally profiling.
No.
Profiling. But when you throw the term race in front of it, then it's illegal.
Well, because you're looking at a specific group of individuals.
Correct.
Does that mean that all people that conduct acts of terrorism are Muslim or Islam? No.
Nope.
Not even close, right? And those people have to be looked at too. Those people have to be paid attention to in the same light.
Yes.
I just don't know that that's happening the way that it should be. When you're uncovering basically a terrorist training camp in New Mexico, where we're training children how to shoot up schools, and that was a big surprise, right?
Yep.
I was like, oh shit, this is here. Huh. And then I guess some of the missteps that have been accused of happening in the subsequent investigation.
Yep.
Have we gotten to the point where we're back to that pre-9/11, that September 10th mentality? Those practices?
Is everything within me wanting to say no, but I'm going to say yes. Yes, I think that we are in that same mentality that led up to the September 11th.
And so, what changes
and
it?
And it's not 100% of the people.
No, of course not.
No, I don't want anybody
of
out there
course
thinking
not.
that that's what we mean. And
no, not at all.
And this is a tough podcast to swallow because it's touching in the deep issues.
Well, I think there's some hard truths that we have to look at. One as a society.
Yes.
One as an institution of law enforcement. In the political spectrum of things as well. I think there's some hard truths that we're trying to get back to where we're turning a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't believe that, and I don't have the answers to everything, but I don't believe that you have to sacrifice a large majority of your freedom for the sake of security, right? It's a risk you take living in a free society.
Yes.
But there are some measures that have to be taken, right, to
Correct.
protect and to keep that free society free and open and moving along. I don't know, man. It's a hard conversation to have because there's a lot of dynamics to it.
There is a lot of dynamics to it, and some people probably think, well, can't you do the vetting process? Hey, the vetting process is great, but if it's been 6 years since you vetted somebody, you mean their ideologies haven't changed?
Right.
I mean, it's all kinds of things.
I just wonder how far we and this is the reverse side of the whole thing. In my head, this is where the battle is, right? Whereas I know we have to remain, vigilant and do our best to prevent incidents from happening, but the other side of me is like, ugh, like how far do we go? What's the acceptable line there of how far we go? Because there's a lot of countries out there in the quote unquote free world that take way more liberties. Their governments take way more liberties than ours do when it comes to looking into people.
Correct.
And what it comes down to, the civil rights of those people are, And it's just a fine line. It's a hard argument. The libertarian in me is like, I feel the same way about enforcing drug laws. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not a proponent of them, being legalized. But it comes down to, I don't agree with a lot of the drug laws on a personal level, but I swore an oath to uphold the law, right? And so in that oath, I have to enforce those laws, right? Does that make me a hypocrite? Maybe. I don't know. I know at the end of the day, I have a job to do. I took an oath.
I would say make you a hypocrite if you were doing those same drugs that you're enforcing the laws to put people in jail over.
Shh. I'm not gonna talk about that.
Hey. What?
Right? No, I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you're enforcing things that you're doing yourself, yeah, that on a personal level, sure, that makes you an absolute hypocrite, right? When it comes down to belief systems, I mean, I don't know. I think weed should be legalized, right? I think it's a waste of time. I think it's a massive waste of time for law enforcement. But yet, if I catch somebody with a big, huh?
Let's take it. You haven't read any of the studies in Colorado.
I mean, Colorado's an experiment.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways, the experiment in Colorado has been successful. In other ways, it hasn't.
In many ways that it hasn't.
In California, it's been successful. In other places.
California.
Well, I mean,
I've never been there, so I don't want to talk about it.
But I mean, we can get into the whole weed argument, but there's far more dangerous legal drugs out there than weed. You know what I mean? Marijuana is a plant, and marijuana has certain properties to it that aren't harmful at all. Actually, they're beneficial in a lot of different ways. I'm not a proponent of myself smoking marijuana. One, because I hate the smell of it. Two, because I have no interest in it. Three, because I'm a cop, and that would be one, a violation of my oath, and it can get me fired.
Yes.
And I grew up. My mom smoked pot, which is why I hate pot. I hate it, but at the same time, I don't think it's that big a deal, right? At the end of the day, possessing and consuming narcotics. I'm not talking about manufacturing and delivery here. I'm talking about possessing it and consuming it is a victimless crime, other than yourself. You're only damaging yourself, right? And I'm of the mindset, if you want to damage yourself, damage yourself. It's your choice. If you want to do that to yourself, great. But at the same time, all those things are illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but are they truly damaging themselves? Because they're usually damaging somebody else in the process.
It just depends. It depends on their situation.
Well,
It depends on their level of use. Again, it's another dynamic situation. There's a lot of levels to it, right?
Correct.
If I'm recreationally using marijuana, which I'm not, but if I was, right, to get a little high and feel good and relax, right, and it's not affecting anyone else, who am I hurting?
That's why they have alcohol.
Right, but alcohol kills more people. You don't hear about, massive amounts of people getting killed because of marijuana, right? You hear about massive amounts of people getting killed because of alcohol. And alcohol's effect on you is much different than marijuana.
Depends if it's laced, but that's
I'm
dynamics.
Yeah, I'm talking about pure weed.
Correct.
Right? I don't know how we got off on this.
I don't either, but let's go ahead and get back to the 9/11.
But the point of it is the point of it is where do you draw the line between those, what your civil liberties are, versus security, versus how far do you go, how far do you not go? I think there's a balance there, and I think we teeter on it, right? I think we teeter back and forth on it.
That's why they call it the blind scales of justice.
Right, the blind scales of justice. But I don't know. I might be just talking to my ass. I don't know anything. I'm just a dumb cop. But I think that on September 11th, 2001, an ideology punched us in the face. And I think the lessons from that punch that we took are ones that we can't forget. And I think that we are. I think we're moving towards that, if we're not there already.
I'd say it'd be more like we got stabbed in the gut.
Well,
we still may have the scar showing it, but a lot of people forgot the initial pain.
Right. And God forbid anything ever happen again. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But you're probably right. It'd probably take another incident, another attack, another devastatingly large situation for people to remember.
Yep.
And then the question becomes, with all the changes and the swings in our societies, socially and not to discredit people of the up and coming generation that are out there wearing a uniform and kicking ass, right? There's a good number of the up and coming generation that are hard chargers, and they get out there and they want to do good, and they want to take the fight to the enemy, and they want to do good things and keep people safe. But there's a larger percentage that is not like that, and I think there's enough examples of that in society and media and social media to show that. But how does that group of individuals, how do they? Because remember, when 9/11 2001 happened, and you're only a few years removed from me. We were those that generation. You know what I mean? We were that in that age bracket.
Yeah, my daughter was fixing to be born. She was born like less than 60 days after that.
You got to think that would they respond to it the way that our group did, our generation? I
would love to say yes. I don't think they would because they're too worried about what restroom they can use.
I would love to think that something that catastrophic, something that horrible would bring us together.
I would hope
again.
so, and I'm pretty sure that our parents and grandparents had the same conversations.
I'm sure they did, and I'm hopefully they were pleasantly surprised, but I just don't know if that's the case this time. You know, I want to believe that it would be the case, but I just don't know. I just don't know that it is. And
I know, personally speaking, my granddad was a World War II vet, and
as was mine.
Out of his 37 grandchildren,
Jesus.
I'm the only one that went military.
Jesus.
So
I don't know, man.
I know it's
kind of scary to think about.
A little bit.
How far will that torch be carried once it's time to pass it on? I don't know.
Hopefully long enough that I don't have to see it.
Hopefully. It'd be nice if, one day we could claim victory, but I don't know if that's a possibility. I mean, how do you defeat an ideology?
You don't.
You don't.
They've been doing that since, you know where I stand religiously, but they've been doing that since Jacob and Esau, the two brothers. Warring back and forth for ages.
Right. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a complicated issue.
It is.
It's a complicated issue, but I think it's an issue that's important. It's vital to our future. It's vital to our security. It's vital to our generations that will surpass us. You know, our lineage, our bloodlines. I think it's greatly important. Do you have any thoughts or comments on remembrance of 9/11 and moving forward?
I do. I have quite a few. For those of you that are listening that has lost a loved one, they are not forgotten. There are people like JC, Big Bo, and myself that are out there trying to make an effort on the quote-unquote civilian aspect of the front lines. We honor their sacrifices. All the people in the military that have lost their lives for this, I think about y'all daily. And just like Jocko from the Jocko podcast states, I mean, we greatly appreciate everything you did.
Absolutely. I think that just it goes without saying, you know. Well, BD,
JC,
I'm glad you're able to come back on the show.
I appreciate that, man.
I like having you here. Yeah.
It's because of my dad bod.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're all rocking that.
All right.
So I faltered big time on the diet this week. So it's all the terrorists' fault because
you got emotional and started eating.
No, it's not that. It's that, you know, every year around this time, you know, everybody wants to, and it's super appreciated. I'm not complaining about it, so don't take my tone a different way, but everybody wants to honor, you know, first responders and all that because of 9/11.
Diabetes week.
Yes. And so police departments get flooded with all sorts of goodies and
by extremely well-meant citizens.
Absolutely, and super appreciated.
Yes.
Super appreciated unless you're a fat guy on a diet like me. So, no, I'm just kidding. It's appreciated. But you walk in, you know, you go down the street and you come back, and then there's like a table literally full of cookies and cakes and cupcakes and snacks and
I'm right there.
All these sweet little cards from these kids at school.
One of the citizens sent us some, and my kryptonite is chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah. And
these things were about the size of a saucer cup.
Oh my God.
And they were crunchy on the outside, but moist in the middle.
Moist.
Like the perfect cookie.
They were moist.
Right?
Moist in your mouth. Yeah, I failed miserably. I held out for a little bit. I did.
Yeah.
I had some willpower.
But unlike the SFSTs, you can get back up and start over.
And I did. I jumped straight off the cliff. Yeah. So my diet went to shit. So recommitting to back to it tomorrow. Back to the good stuff tomorrow.
Eggs and bacon.
Actually, I have to go to the grocery store. That's not important. So start going down my list of things to do. But yeah, going back on it tomorrow. Getting back on that high protein, low carb diet. Get some good stuff in there. Low sugars. Preferably no sugars, but my willpower is not that solid yet, so I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Just so you know, Big Bo fell off it too. We're just weak, sad little fat men.
Look at it this way: he's a true partner. He didn't want you to go through it alone.
That wasn't it at all. He's just a fat ass like me. That's all it is. You just might as well just shovel that shit down our throats.
Speaking of which, with his photo behind you, he keeps on. It looks like he's scowling at me. He's like, "You're sitting in my spot."
I mean, he's kind of smiling. Looks like he's about to eat the microphone.
Well, that too. I mean, like the Cookie Monster, but
yeah, it kind of does.
He's got that little stink eye going on.
So, for those who don't know what we're talking about, we have two portraits of Big Bo and me up on the wall here in the studio, and where BD is sitting, they're staring right at him. So, I'm sure that's weird.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Because you're doing the hang ten.
I am. Yeah. I gotta stop doing stupid shit like that. You know what's funny is like, I don't know what to do with my hands in a photo. I don't know what to do. No clue. So I do what everybody else does. I either put a fist or I put the fucking, heavy metal deal. I don't ever do the peace sign.
No, it's bunny ears behind that.
Oh. I put it behind myself.
All right.
Or I'll do the, hang loose, hang 10, whatever.
I try to do that, or I try to do the stoic crossing my arms and the nod of approval.
The nod of approval?
Yeah.
That's funny. You're proud of your kid?
Yeah.
You're like, yes, you finally get it.
Yes, they walked up and slapped that other kid in the back of the head because they were stupid.
Good job. All right. Well, you have anything else to add?
Nope.
All right. So, I'm going to announce it here. I'm going to announce it now. I'm going to announce it fast because I'm moist with excitement. And the Street Warrior Radio podcast is going to be undergoing some changes. Some big changes. We are going to change our episode format. We're going to drop the length of time. We've had some people like the super long form. Some people don't. But we're gonna drop the length from hour and a half, hour 45, 2 hours down to about an hour per episode, and we're gonna release more episodes per week. So start looking for episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And the hope is to eventually increase to 5 episodes a week down the road.
But JC, if they wanted to get a hold of you, how do they do it?
Well, if they want to get a hold of me, they can contact me directly at jc@streetwearradio.com. They can hit me up on Instagram. Instagram handle is jc_swr. You can follow me on there. I don't post a lot, but occasionally I do, and most of it's dumb stuff. I don't know why I post, but I do. Or you can contact on the Streetwear Radio website at streetwearradio.com/contact. Fill out the contact form there. Or you can email the podcast email, which is info@streetwearradio.com. If you want to get a hold of Big Bo and complain why he's never here, you can reach him directly at BIGBO. That's Big Bo at streetwarriorradio.com. You can also send us a message on Facebook, Street Warrior Radio Podcast. You can also send us a DM on Twitter. Handle is at STRT, the word warrior, RDIO. You can find the podcast on iTunes, GooglePlay, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and pretty much anywhere that podcasts can be found, except for SoundCloud. Fuck SoundCloud. And then, yeah.
Be original and tell everybody about us.
What?
reverse psychology.
Oh, yeah. Threw me off. Okay, so BD, any parting words? Any words of encouragement?
Those of you out there, we got your back. Appreciate you listening. Stay in the fight.
And with that, I want to thank all of our men and women in our armed forces around the world fighting the good fight, keeping us free, keeping us safe. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for the sacrifices you make. To our first responder brethren, our police, fire, paramedics, etc. Thank you for what you do. Remember your oath. Go out there and do the right thing. To the families of our military and first responders, thank you for what you do. Thank you for the sacrifices, the heartache, the stress, everything that you go through in order to support your first responder or your serviceman. It's noted, and we appreciate you. And to everyone else out there, our fans, our followers, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for supporting us, for being there. We really appreciate it. Please send us your comments, questions, concerns, war stories, etc. We love sharing them on the air, and we love reading them. Also, we enjoy the people that tell us we're stupid. We have a special place in our heart for them as well. So, with that, you all out there make the service worth it. You make the sacrifice worth it. And Street Warrior Radio is out of service.